I'd like to introduce our next speaker now. We have Rizvan Khalid. And just to let you know, a reminder, after that I'm going to be asking our three speakers who we've heard from to join us for a panel discussion which will be chaired by Dr. Phil Hadley, who I'll be introducing shortly. But Rizvan Khalid is Senior Director of Euro Quality Lambs UK, the largest Muslim-owned lamb abattoir in Europe. He's currently board member of Eblex and AIMS and is highly involved in the fields of animal slaughter, halal welfare and meat quality. He has an MSc in Meat Science and Technology from the University of Bristol, and his dissertation on the effect of bleeding by different slaughter methods is due to be published very shortly. I'd like to ask Rizvan Khalid to join us now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I think you've taken some of my slides away by the introduction, so that's good. We can crack on with the rest of the presentation. But first of all, thank you to Saqib for inviting us over here and for putting this together. It was an excellent initiative, excellent event, and I hope it carries on every year. But in the interest of time, I will try to go through things fairly quickly, but try to give you a flavor of where I'm coming at it from. So, our company, Euro Quality Lambs, we've been established, my family's been in the industry since the 70s. We're based in Craven Arms, we've been there since 92. And really what I want to do, quickly talk about, quick background, quick talk about the Islamic requirement for ihsan, which means perfection, our experience in sheep, and then pulling on that from my MSc background, some observations about cattle and poultry. And then talking about two other topical issues, which is one is about the potential for kosher to be diverted into halal supply chain, and the other thing is about the topical of animal welfare labeling. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So brother's already given quite a bit of examples, so I can skip over a lot of this. We are the largest Muslim-owned lamb abattoir in Europe. We do a lot of export into Europe at the moment. And we supply halal lamb, both electric head-only stunning and slaughter without stunning, depending on our customer requirements. So we do everything for whoever wants it, but everything that we do is halal. I'm Senior Director of the company, and I've got an MSc in Meat Science and Technology, and Steve Watson is actually my supervisor and one of my professors over here, so I feel honored to be following him up on here. So it was very good to hear him speak about that. And I'm also heavily involved in the halal industry with various trade organizations. This is a critical hadith. I don't know if people on this side of the room can see very well because I may be blocking it over here, but it's over there as well. Okay, thank you. A lot of people in the room know about the Quran, know about the ayats which relate to halal and the requirements for halal and what makes halal. But the hadith is also a fundamental source of Islamic law. And the hadith, there are different categories of hadith. And there are certain hadiths which are given more prominence. This particular hadith is from Imam An-Nawawi's hadith of 42 hadith. And it is a fundamental hadith which encapsulates being excellent in whatever field you're in, and also in terms of slaughtering the best way possible. So to read it out loud, verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed ihsan, the Arabic word ihsan, which means excellence, proficiency, perfection in all things. And then it goes on. So if you kill, kill well. If you slaughter, slaughter well. Let each one of you sharpen his blade, and let him spare suffering to the animal that he slaughters. So that is a principle over here. And it doesn't say let him eliminate suffering to the animals. By its very nature, slaughter will always cause suffering to animals. It is about what can we do in every little bit to try to minimize that suffering at the point of slaughter. And this requirement for ihsan, for excellence, should be in every aspect of our life, whether it's in a business, whether it's in how we interact with each other, whether it's in any field that we're in. Saqib already touched upon that halal isn't just about meat, it's a whole concept, it's a way of life. And ihsan, and Angela mentioned very, very articulately about the issues that happen in modern farming methods. So when we talk about halal and when we talk about tayyib, it's very important for people to realize that halal at a very basic religious level is a key set of parameters of the things you have to do and the things you have to avoid. But over and above that, you have what's called religiously recommended items or religiously disliked items, which will make it a higher status of halal. But if you don't do, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not halal. But those religiously superior items would be what would constitute tayyib. So I'm going to talk about sheep. Now, again, I'm restricting this to the slaughter without stunning aspect of our business. So sheep anatomically are the best animal to slaughter from a slaughter without stunning perspective. And I've got some data over here in terms of the time to unconsciousness from Steve's research from before in 1982. No, sorry, that was other research. But the time to unconsciousness was 2 to 7 seconds, as done by Newhook and Blackmore in 1982, which Falk used those figures for as well. The HSA used the figures, which was Steve's research, the time to brain death, which is from measuring visually evoked responses, which is approximately 14 seconds. And then you also have the time to when the heart ceases to beat, and that has been measured, again in the same Newhook and Blackmore research, up to 10 minutes. So for the scholars in the room, there is a difference between brain death and heart, the cessation of the heart. One can lead to the other, but it's possible for the animal to be dead, but the heart, being a muscle, to carry on beating for many minutes afterwards. So from a scholarly perspective, identifying the point of death and what do you actually mean by the animals alive at the point of slaughter is very, very important. So that's why I raised that point over there. As a business, what do we aim to do in our premises? We have tried to put in the best pre-slaughter handling system possible. And this is true whether you're doing it with stunning or without stunning. And we've changed our slaughter methods twice in the last 6 years to try to incrementally get better and better and better how we do it. The layerage has to be systematically designed for a better flow of animals. Angela talked about best natural behavior. You want to try to get the sheep to move themselves in the area where you want them to move, rather than having to push the sheep where you want them to go. Operator training and positioning is critical. If they stand in the right place, sheep will naturally try to get away from human beings. You can direct them to where you want them to go just by your positioning. You don't have to touch them at all. We have tried to design a system so our human intervention is there to actually slow or stop the sheep rather than having to move them to where we want them. So the system is tried to be designed in a way that the sheep will move where you want them to move, but if you want to slow them down, that's when you try to intervene. So it's trying to minimize any human intervention. Access to water. There's a hadith that says feed and give the animal water before you slaughter it. Now from a slaughtering perspective, we would try to restrict feed immediately before slaughter, because when animals have a full stomach, when you're dressing the animal inside, there's a possibility of the gut rupturing. So that causes a contamination of the carcass. But water for the animal, definitely very, very good. It helps to relax them. And there's a hadith to say that give them access to water. So it's a legal requirement across Europe that all pens have to have water in them. But I'm tying into the Islamic requirements for animal welfare into this. We've also installed a motorized crowd pen. This is at the point where the animals go from a batch system into a single file system. And some people have pens in which they manhandle the sheep into the restraint or the next process. Most modern large throughput abattoirs have crowd pens. And what happens is that if you imagine a circular pen, they come into a batch system, and as the gates get pushed around, you fix one gate so the segment of that pie gets smaller, and you try to get the sheep into a single file system. We worked with an engineer to have a motorized floor, so there's no need to push the gates as the animal are going into single file. The whole system moves the gate around. So again, there's less pushing of the gates against the sheep to move them into where you want them to go. The best restraint, a V restrainer system. I don't know if people have seen this, but essentially all it is 2 conveyor belts in a V. And what happens is that because of that structure, we have here in the UK a wide variety of sheep with different sizes, from different breeds, etc. With the V restrainer, if it's a big sheep, it'll sit higher up in the restrainer. If it's a small sheep, it'll sit a bit lower down. it caters for all sizes of animals. Other ways people can restrain it, you have a cradle where people can flip it over onto the back, what they do on the farm quite a lot. It works, but you have to manhandle the sheep and you have to flip it over onto the back. Some slaughterhouses use it for low throughput, but for large throughput, it's not possible. The V-restrainers is the best way. Once the sheep sees the next sheep in front of it, it will go into the V-restrainer by itself without even having to touch it. Optimal restraint, the feet are off the ground. It works to any size, the animal relaxes. We have tried having the animal in the V-restrainer over the break period. They are happy as Larry in the V-restrainer. There's nothing in the V-restrainer that causes it to be in a cause of stress. And it facilitates good slaughterman access to the neck. Now, the actual slaughtering process itself. Sharp slaughter knife. This is really important, and it comes back to the Ihsan hadith that we talked about before. So when you sharpen when you slaughter well, and sharpen the knife of the animal. A good sharp knife will cause loss of consciousness quicker and will be less painful for the animal. So maintaining a good sharp knife is very, very important. And not sharpening the knife in front of the animal. Again, this is another hadith, which isn't a fundamental halal criteria, but it is a recommended criteria. It is a higher status from a halal perspective. You don't want to kill the animal twice, as the Prophet ﷺ put it. So when you sharpen, turn your back, so the animal doesn't see you sharpening the knife. Not slaughtering one animal in front of the other animal. Again, a recommended criteria, but the Prophet ﷺ did it to try to put the animal more at ease. So you have small curtains that try to prevent the animals looking at each other as they're being slaughtered. The slaughterman facing Qibla. All religious acts that we do, when we make a prayer, when we do our prayers, when we make a supplication, we face Qibla, Mecca. Again, not a core requirement, but if the slaughterman, whilst he's slaughtering the animal, faces Qibla, it is a higher standard. Use a full blade to make a deep cut, a deep slice to the carotid arteries. And from a religious perspective, you have to cut at least 3 of the 4 main vessels. So 4 vessels being wind, food, the carotids, and the jugular veins. So Islamically, we have to cut at least 3 of them. From a scientific perspective, we need to cut the carotids because that is what feeds the brain with blood for longer. So they're the ones that we always aim for, and legally, this is what we have to do. The tasmiyah, absolutely critical. Reciting in the name of God, God is great. If you don't do it, it's not halal. The correct length of blade for the animal, you try to do it so you do it in 1 cut. That is the aim. An ergonomic slaughter knife. You want the slaughterman to not feel tired while he's doing the slaughtering. Anything that you can do to ease the pressures on him will cause for a better slaughter throughout the day. He's not just slaughtering one animal. In our place, he's doing 3,000–4,000 a day. And we've also put in recently movable platforms. So some slaughtermen are taller than others. So by adjusting the height and having the right working conditions, you can again ease their tiredness so that while they're slaughtering, they can maintain the effectiveness of the slaughter throughout the day. But this is all about practice, training, and continual fine-tuning. And individual slaughtermen have preferences. Some slaughtermen they sterilize his position somewhere different to someone else, depending on how they like to work. You have to try to design a system which will make the best use of them. Customization. So how do we make things even better for that? This is what we've done based on my knowledge of MSc, speaking to other people in industry. How do we try to make things even better? We need to develop, share, and promote best practice guidelines to move the industry forward. We need to develop a best practice slaughter with outstanding standard so that people know what does best practice look like. And some future research potential. I'm gonna run through these very quickly. Slaughter knife sharpness training and assessment. There's a project proposal going on at the moment which is about seeing how can we make the slaughter knife even more sharper, and how can we assess that objectively. There's a question about whether an increased heart rate i.e. a little bit of stress to slaughter might actually help the time to unconsciousness quicker. I'm not sure about that, but it's a potential idea worth to explore. And last one is where the strategic use of hearing, i.e. this may sound a little bit silly, but having music of nature in the lairage to try to put the animals at ease so they feel more in a natural environment rather than in a man-made environment, can use of noise, use of music, use of smells, use of vision, can that make the environment feel a bit less unfamiliar to try to put them more at ease? So that could be a good area to research. I haven't got a lot of time, but I'm going to try to talk about some of the other areas. In cattle is where the biggest risk is from a slaughter without studying perspective. We do not do slaughter of cattle, so I have not had the chance to be able to test what the best ways of doing it is. But traditionally, when you do a zab slaughter, which is a neck cut slaughter, that is, it doesn't cut the vertebral artery, which is another artery that comes from the carotids that goes through the vertebra, through the spine. That's the zabiha method. There is a method Islamically where you do the nehr slaughter, which is a chest cut. That is performed now in Arab countries on camels. But traditionally, it hasn't been performed in cattle. But anatomically, we know that if it can be performed, the cattle will lose consciousness a lot quicker than what it's doing at the moment. So this is an area really worth exploring. And this is the position. So you see the neck cut over here doesn't cut this artery here. But if we do a chest cut at the back here, it cuts right through to the artery before it branches off. So it's worth exploring for any students that are in the room. Other potential improvements. Nahar, for kosher slaughter, there isn't any standing allowed whatsoever. So nahar is not actually possible for kosher slaughter. The position of the zab, the neck cut, Professor Gregory did a research about looking at where the position on the neck may cause better optimal slaughter points. So he talked about C1 position being closer to the jaw. So that may be an area where we could do more research on to see does that improve it. Slaughtering the lateral recumbency position. Again, in kosher, some people slaughter animals completely upside down. But there is research that's been done to say that if a cattle is in the 90 degrees position, i.e. not upright but on its side, that when they tried to foot trim cattle, dairy cattle, they were far less stressed on the sideways position than they were upright. And if you do it in the lateral recumbency position, it'll be easier for the slaughterman to make the neck cut, which could mean lower cuts and a better, deeper cut. So that could be a potential for doing slaughtering on cattle if you had to do the neck cut. There's also potential for the blood. There's a risk of the blood being aspired when you do the neck cut. That potential is eliminated by the nahar, but when you're doing the zab, the neck cut, that's still there. So with the angling, you may be able to divert that blood away from the aorta. But in the UK, this is regularly used on farm, but it's actually illegal to do it at the slaughter method, and so at the slaughtering point. So it's something that we need to see if we need to try to ask government to at least allow this research to be carried out to see if it's going to improve the slaughter without stunning, particularly from a kosher perspective. Okay, Steve's talked a lot about poultry, so I'm going to rattle through this because time's but the restraint is crucial on the poultry side. How do you try to avoid life shackling? We talked about the problems of the legs, the weight, etc. Is a cone system better? Is the breast conveyor the next best system? The restraint is so important for the poultry side of things. And in terms of slaughtering, how do you present the neck and the head for the slaughterman to do the slaughtering? The practical difficulty with the line speeds of doing the tasmiyah on every single bird. Poultry, the big poultry systems go at 10, 12,000 an hour. That's 3 birds every second. Now, how do you do the tasmiyah on those birds or those animals? When you go slaughter without stunning, you got to think about all these things when you design the best system. And post-slaughtering quality, Steve touched upon that there is flapping whether you do electric head-only stunning, and also when you do it without stunning, there's a lot of bird flapping, which means there's lots of downgrades from a meat quality perspective. One possible solution is to do a post-cut stun after the cut has been performed to try to reduce the flapping, which may have positive effects on the meat quality perspective, but it needs to be tested out from a market acceptability perspective. from an Islamic perspective, the slaughter has been done. So the post-cut stunning from the halal basic criteria doesn't get affected by that. You're going to push me on all this, aren't you? Yeah, I thought so. Okay. So working with kosher. Just very quickly, kosher and halal are very similar, but in kosher they don't do any stunning whatsoever. The other issue with kosher from a UK market perspective is that quite a lot of the kosher animal, even if it's slaughtered by a Jewish person, is not acceptable as kosher. So 70% of the animal may be rejected from the Jewish marketplace because of further inspection tests carried out by Jewish people along the line. Now, that meat could be diverted into the halal market with one main difference. The key difference between the Jewish slaughterer and the Muslim slaughterer is that they do not recite tasmiyah on every animal. But one potential is that if the Jewish guy was to say, in the name of the God of Abraham, who we also believe in as Muslims, or the God of Moses, and there's a Muslim person there to witness him saying that from all scholars' perspective would be completely acceptable as halal. Whether the market will accept it is a different thing, but from an Islamic acceptance perspective, there is no doubt that that would be deemed as halal. So it's an area worth pursuing. And that allows all the traditionally slaughtered meat without stunning to be fully utilized within all the religious market. Because this is an issue in the kosher sector, not so much in the halal sector. Because the halal sector readily absorbs all the halal slaughter without stunning. Because only 20% of the halal market is without stunning. In kosher, all the kosher is without stunning. Again, I'll just go through all of this welfare labeling considerations. There has been talk about trying to have a welfare label to show whether it's been done slaughter without stunning. We have to be careful about going through that route because you don't want the label to become discriminatory. So if a welfare label needs to be applied, I would suggest that it needs to go down the route of the Global Animal Partnership. And that is a 5-step animal welfare standards program from Canada, which assesses welfare on farm, in transport, at slaughter, to try to get to a 5 hierarchy end figure that can go on the meat, so you know that where does that welfare sit for that animal. And Angela talked about other issues that happen on farm in terms of beak trimming, in terms of tail docking, in terms of castration. How do they sit objectively from a welfare perspective vis-a-vis each other? And where would that sit as a rating on the welfare status of that animal? So when we look at welfare, it's for the life of the animal. It's not just for slaughter. So we need to consider it all throughout the whole life. Here's some references, and that's it. So sorry to go on a bit longer, but